Okay, so we're now recording, so I'd like to welcome you to this event. So my name is Brett Bligh. I'm the co-director of the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning at Lancaster University, and we host this series of events called Meet and Eat, where we meet to discuss a paper with its author. So in this case, we're very happy to welcome Victoria Marín from the Department of Pedagogy at the University of Lleida, Spain. Somebody's going to tell me I pronounced that very badly, but I'm sure Victoria will correct me in a minute. So in a moment, Victoria is going to give a presentation and then we're going to discuss the paper afterwards. We did also circulate the paper, which I happen to have read, so I'm going to boast about that. So you might want to be, it'll be possible to pose questions about the paper as well as what Victoria says. I know Victoria is going to draw on her own personal experiences as well as the Delphi study. It's worth saying this event will be recorded and disseminated afterwards on the YouTube channel. So if there are people you think should see it and they weren't able to attend, then please do send it to them afterwards. This event is part of the Celebrating International Collaboration events for 2022. That's a departmental-wide initiative in the Department of Educational Research at Lancaster University. It was one of the reasons why we asked Victoria to talk about this paper specifically. And I know that Don is able to who's coordinating that series, is able to say a couple of words about the purpose and nature of that series. Are you, would you be able to do that now, Don?
Certainly. Thanks, Brett, and thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so I'm Don Passey. I'm the Director of International Strategy for the department, and one of my tasks is to coordinate the international series of events that we run each year. And for the past couple of years, we've run an event called Celebrating International Collaboration. And this year that has been specifically focused on visiting researchers. So I'm very pleased that in that series of events, each centre has run a separate event. And this is the event that the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning is running. We've had 2 centre events and an overall department event previously. So this is the last event in that series, which comes at the end of this calendar year. So that's entirely appropriate that it should end the year. And can I say my thanks to the centre for liaising on this and for managing this and for putting this together as part of that series. And I think that this is very, very appropriate in terms of this focus. And I'm delighted that, Victoria, you're willing to talk on this area of international collaboration. And I look forward to a fascinating session. So thank you all very much. And I look forward to the event.
Thanks, Don. Okay, so now we'll take just a few seconds for me to stop sharing my slides and Victoria to start sharing theirs, and then we'll be ready to get started. So, Victoria, you should be able to share now.
So it should be visible right now.
It is indeed. Yeah. So
okay.
Let me just say a few words of introduction. So we're very happy to welcome Victoria from the University of Lleida. Victoria's current main research interests are personal learning environments, pre-service teacher training, e-learning, social media in training and professional development, uses of open source in education, academic social networks, mobile learning, e-portfolios in higher education, self-regulated learning with digital media, research-based learning with digital tools, and data literacy. So Victoria is an associate lecturer of educational technology in the Department of Applied Pedagogy and Educational Psychology, and has produced a formidable list of papers over recent years, including the one we're about to read. I know today Victoria is going to draw on their personal experiences of doing and being an international visitor and doing international collaboration, as well as the paper we've read. So Victoria, we're really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Brett and Don, for the presentations, the introduction, and also for the invitation. So it's a pleasure to be here and be able to talk about this topic from my experience and also from the vision of this paper. So actually, the position that you mentioned was the previous one. Actually, one of the previous one. Actually, now I'm a research fellow at the University of Lleida in Spain. Since last year, and in as you have seen from my research interest, quite varied. It's in educational technology, so I'm doing different things from different positions since I started. So this topic, I think it's really suitable for what I have been doing, because actually I have been doing different visits, also different kinds of collaboration, also completely online collaboration. So I have some experience to talk about, but I would like to first just have a short background about this kind of experience that I have. Then I will connect to the paper, to some of the interesting or most, I would say, highlighted findings and information that I think are more interesting to mention. And then I will also connect to some parts that I would like to discuss with you and talk, which I think will be really nice, since we have a really international participants here. I think will be interesting to know more about your international research experiences as well in collaboration. So first, I took the definition of international research collaboration from our paper, which is also some kind of development elaboration from different participants. I will talk more concretely about that, but I wanted to first come with the definition to see what we understand under international research collaboration. So we have different important points, like involving researchers from different countries. So here we thought that this point is important, especially because sometimes we think that international collaboration should happen in different countries. So that's not necessarily the case. So we could be researchers that come from different places, different backgrounds, cultural, language backgrounds. We are cooperating on research projects, and then we had different kind of activities that we can do in these cooperations, like discussing ideas, presenting at conferences, preparing grant proposals, conducting actual young research, or writing publications. So probably the most common way of collaboration that can be easily measured, as we will discuss later, it's a co-authorship, like metrics, to see different people working in the same paper. It's more visible, but there are other aspects that are not so clear, which clearly visible, but they are also part of this kind of collaboration. So we have different activities entailing this concept that we considered here. So to talk about my background in international research collaboration, so I can say, well, originally I'm from a Spanish Mediterranean island, which is Mallorca. Perhaps you know it. So that's where I'm born, and I also work some time. Then there I had my first international research experiences through projects that were actually cooperation projects, but entail some research activities with Argentina and Bolivia, for example. And this, I think, was also, that's an interesting experience, because there was, even if we have the same language, you notice the different cultural backgrounds, and people work differently, paces are different, working routines. So these are things that I already noticed at that point, and then we will discuss later more about this. Then also, for me, although we will discuss later about social media, for me, Twitter was also a way of contacting internationally with people that I have never met before, and start some international research collaborations. So that's an interesting point for this starting early career stage where I was in that point. Then we have an inter-university master and doctorate in educational technology program, which is carried out by 4 universities in Spain, but which has international participants, especially from Latin America as well. And there, it is completely online, both programs. And that has been for a while. And there we had always getting people from, especially from Latin America, coming to do some visit and do their PhD stays, working with us at the lab. So that was like in presence experience before the pandemic. Then later something changed, which we will also talk about. But these were also these other connections with international research collaboration, doing things together there. And then during my doctoral research stay, I was abroad also doing international research collaboration, which continues right now after some years only online. So then the pandemic came when I started doing my first postdoc in Germany. The beginning was, that was, of course, for me, was also still international research collaboration. Being in a different, also from a different background, working with other people who were also different, not always German, but also other countries, coming from other countries. But then the last year was affected by the pandemic, which changed quite a lot how we collaborate, increasing our synchronous meetings and working more intensively and less informally in those sessions, which you probably have all experienced. And then also different international projects and initiatives were affected by the pandemic and reshaped. So we, for example, developed different grant proposals only online, working together in some specific meetings, synchronous meetings, and then mostly asynchronously when we could, because everyone has their own different schedules, different commitments. So this was quite different in that part. And then I did also some stays in the last 2 years, and I also noticed some changes that I will comment later with in connection with the paper. So they just as a background to start with. So let's talk about the paper to get into detail about different aspects of international research collaboration in education. So here, well, we came to this topic because we are the 3 of the authors were from different places, we're in the same place when we were developing this study, but coming from different backgrounds, from Australia, Germany, and Spain. We had different ways of working and thinking, and so that came also because of that. And also because it was also one of the trending topics in the last years that needed more research beyond working on co-authorship studies, bibliometric studies. So we wanted to develop further research on that topic because of that. Then we observed although this study was done before the pandemic, we also observed some specific trends during the pandemic, like, for example, that it was more likely that countries that have been more affected by the pandemic were collaborating more internationally. There were some studies about that, but that was especially in engineering and health sciences. So still other studies like in educational sciences were increasing, but not at the same pace. Then we see that there are more publications that are co-authored, not the same pace for international co-authoring, that in the same of metrics, but we know that co-authorship usually underestimates the collaborations that are there, because as I was saying before, you don't always do only publications, so you have other kind of collaborations that they are not so visible in outputs, I would say. Then there is a high disparity between disciplines, as I was saying. It's not the same health science and, or educational sciences, and countries, which we will also address later about the global north and the global south. There was here important differences that we also see in our systematic reviews, who is publishing and from where it's coming. So as I was saying, so even if there is a rise in that time and in the last years in internationally co-authored research, that doesn't mean exactly that always are creating new international research collaborations as well. Could be also ongoing collaborations and not concretely more new things because of the difference between the publications and the different activities of research. So, for example, I found it interesting to remind that that a specific quote from our systematic review, mapping review on emergency remote teaching in higher education, which I co-authored with some of the authors on the other article. So we saw in that in this mapping review that it says, although the pandemic struck globally, academic collaboration in research occurred mostly with domestic colleagues and in teams working with 2 or 3 authors. So actually, international collaboration was around 14% of the publications that we analyzed in this paper, which was mostly, educational sciences. So we can see that still, even if there was a small increase, the international part was not so clearly seen in those studies, for example. So if we continue with that paper on international collaboration in the field of educational research, you probably have seen this model where we try to map the factors that affect international research collaboration, which probably applies for other disciplines as well. But we see in the researcher in the center, and then the micro level talks about a specific aspects of the researcher. So I mentioned some of them, and I would say that this level is probably one of the most important ones, because we have like the learning habits of the researcher, but also which kind of motivations and attitudes have towards other people and towards work, the colleagues they have. Then language and culture, they are also here, or the technology skills. So if you have to also collaborate online, which was the only case in the pandemic, that will also influence how you can collaborate, or the career stage, which is something that perhaps also is not so clear from our co-authorships, but indeed has some kind of role. And I will mention some examples later. So then in the meso system, we see this background of socioeconomic aspects, and in connection with that in the exosystem is the institutional factors. So we have here, for example, the institutional culture or the institutional funding or the institutional routine. So every institution works differently, even, I would say, even the same country, depending on which kind of university is it. And that could also influence the kind of policies that are regarding international research collaborations. So these are some aspects. There is also mention about the infrastructure and data security and storage, which is also an element that is mentioned later. But of course, having a suitable infrastructure and technology will also influence how we can connect with others internationally. And then in the macro system, there are all these factors that are more usually at the national or regional level, like more how it's the state of digitalization for this country, or the kind of infrastructure, the political and social environments. Interestingly and importantly, time zone and location, which is something that will come later as well. Power policy. So these are other macro factors that influence the other systems. So we will get to them, to some of them specifically in the next parts. So in that paper, as you have seen, we wanted to go beyond those studies on metrics to see, so how actually from the perspective of the researchers, how does international academic research collaboration occur in the field of educational research? So here we asked them about their understandings, the reasons why they were conducting this kind of research, stages in the process and the technologies they used, and then the first and second order benefits and barriers that they consider. So for the understandings, we have seen already the definition that we got to. So that was one of the research results. But we got to those results from all these open questions through a Delphi study, in which we invited members of the editorial boards of top education and educational research journals from social sciences citation index in that year, well, in the year previous to our study. And we did these 3 rounds from a first round of a survey where we were asking really open about those questions. We invited 183 persons, but we only got 23 participants. And then the number decreased in the next rounds, which is common in these kind of studies. And then in second round and third round, we tried to get a consensus on the answers and trying to rank on importance of the items that we got in the second round. So I think it's interesting to know also that 78.26% of the persons that were involved in the first round were affiliated to higher education institutions in the US and Europe, which also connects to what I was saying before, that we get also more publications from the global north. We have I just only highlighted some of the most, I think, interesting results. So for example, I highlight the reasons for conducting international research collaboration. So first order, everything about learning. So we want to learn more. We want to learn more from others. We have also some shared interest. We try to challenge our ideas. So it's everything about trying to learn more from this interaction. And the second one, actually, partly as well, right? So we want to try to do more like more interesting research, but we also admire others and want to network. So I found it also interesting because here, opposed to other studies, visibility, reputation, and other aspects more connected to the institutional side, I would say, were not so frequent here. But we will talk about that later as well. Then we talk about technology, and here email was the most technology, the technology most used, which I can say that it's similar to my case and probably to some of you. Then video conferencing for some cases, and that's of course with the pandemic that was the most technology use as well. And then cloud storage to share documents, to comment on documents. So these are mostly what were the technologies used. But then, of course, because that was also before the pandemic, they were also many of them saying that they had face-to-face meetings, especially at the beginning, when they were setting the initial ideas and the distribution of tasks, and at the end of a project or research activities. So these were mentioned quite a lot, was quite popular. With the pandemic, of course, that was not possible. And cases like the case, like I was saying before, you had to create a full proposal without meeting anyone at any point, which makes perhaps a bit harder, even if you don't know all the people in the team, right? And then it was interesting that some of them mentioned difficulties with institutional services. So they were saying, well, we are using some third-party tools or no, depending on how the institutional services were performing. That's something that we have also found, that because we have also all these data privacy regulations, we are usually required to use tools that the institution is providing to every researcher, but sometimes they don't have those options, those kind of functions, or we see that the performance is not as good as the others that we know. And that's something that was also here mentioned, and I could also agree with that, and I will comment some example later. About benefits and barriers. Well, benefits, I think it's again a bit repetition of the reasons, because in the first order is again, well, learning more from others, connecting with others, getting more diversity of perspectives. broaden research experience, which will focus more on this, on the research activity part. And then in the second order, we see here this broader research impact and the global accessibility of knowledge and experts, which you will see also in the paper that were not that frequent, but we still identified them here as second order benefits. So there are also some studies that say that when you have these international co-author publications, thinking about publications, there is more probability that you get more citations, because the networks that are connecting the different authors also increase this outreach, I would say. And then if you are more collaborating internationally, you get easily more international collaboration. So that's something that gets bigger and bigger usually. Barriers. Interestingly, the participants didn't find any major impediment to collaboration, although some practical issues were mentioned, like when you collaborate with people in different countries, they have different ethical research requirements, and perhaps if you have a stricter ethical research requirements and the others don't, then you may have perhaps problems in how you collect data or you do your activities. And then some things about administrative part of how to pay people in other places. But there were like minor comments. No major barriers were mentioned like for many by many people. I wonder if that could also be because most of these people were senior researchers. So that could also make some difference in the kind of position, seniority. So these factors that, of course, these people were in editorial boards in these big top journals. So they have quite a lot of experience as well. So we also made some recommendations there, which I will connect them also with the pandemic. So at the macro system, it says, well, so our participants didn't actually mention too much about funding or institutional support and so on, but from the literature we know that that's of course important, and funding was increased also with some calls because of the pandemic. So that here there were some specific calls regarding that, and we felt that it's of course important because that will also encourage some people that perhaps are not that much into it to get more into international research collaboration. But also we see that the increased European research funding has also increased this co-authorship, international co-authorship publication. So actually has some role, plays some role, but for perhaps not so considered by our participants. And then another aspect was, as I was saying, the recommendation was before the pandemic, this digitalization capacity, like trying to get more people remote working and collaborating. Now that's probably partially, I would not say solved, but addressed, because it's more accepted that you can do more remote working and collaborating with others from home. So even in projects where it was like compulsory to travel to do some specific collaboration, now it's allowed to do things online. So I think that's probably has been addressed somehow, and that's something that has been, I think, a major change for international research collaboration in the last years. Then, of course, we talk about institutional support and funding, because lack of recognition has been considered one thing that I would say it's not a barrier or not so big barrier, but of course it's important if the institution doesn't recognize that you are doing international research collaboration and the effort that involves, some people will not like pursue that, or probably will not pursue that. So that's also interesting. And then if working with other countries that have different ethical guidelines, also giving more policy regarding this kind of aspects and ethics guidelines, for example. And then at the micro level, I will mention then in one of the later slides that in this case, for these participants, English was considered as lingua franca and didn't consider any language communication problem. But I would say that my experience is a bit different, not that big difference because, because of different aspects. But I would say that the kind of participants that we have in here are quite specific and quite a sample more concrete about that. That probably we need to consider also in this micro level the mindfulness of cultural and linguistic differences. So, and I think that's more important even when considering global North and global South, because the linguistic skills are not the same. Depending on which language you are talking and which your culture is and how languages are promoted in your background. So that's something that I think also important to consider here. Then what is the choice of technology for communication? That's something that has been also discussed quite a lot especially after the pandemic, like trying to promote more asynchronous communication to get everyone, get their paces, family responsibilities or other kinds. So that's something more clear now, that we have to choose also different kinds of technology for that. And then it was not mentioned quite prominently in the study, but we also talk about academic social networking sites. We talk about ResearchGate, but also other more general social networks, microblogging in that case, like Twitter, because we had another experience from these participants. So perhaps the seniority had played also a role here, and early career researchers may also take some more profit of these kind of tools, for example. So as I was saying, for these aspects, the digitalization capacity, I would say, has been increased. So actually, we are working more remotely, and collaboration and international research collaboration more done from our offices or from our homes. So that's probably something, a big change. Then is also more technology available. So many of the institutions have both or develop, mostly both, different technology to increase the capacities of technology in their institutions. That's also derived from the pandemic. So I was in Germany at that time, and it was incredible how everything evolved so quickly, and we had a video conference system when we haven't before anything. And so these kind of things were developed so quickly, or were bought so quickly, that everyone had some kind of access. And then, there were some more funding opportunities, specific calls. So I think that was also a positive aspect. So coming to the aspects of the discussion, I brought some specific points, quotes, some parts are quotes from the participants, which I would like also to discuss with you to see what you think. First, we already mentioned that. So here the clear example was us. So we did this study. We happened to work in the same institution in Germany, the three of us. When we were doing this study, then we moved, all of us, and now some of us are in different places. But we were coming from different backgrounds, and that's not easy to see when you sign, for example, an article with the same institution, because you cannot distinguish these kind of backgrounds if you don't explore the history of each researcher. So the idea of trying to go for studies that go beyond co-authorship metrics, I think that's important to actually estimate the real impact or the real coverage of international research collaboration. Then, I mentioned also that before, but I found interesting this difference between the literature and what the participants said about how international research collaboration was helping researchers to get more visibility and productivity, sharing resources, instead of more this learning or trying to learn from others. So that were differences here. And here I would like to discuss with you if you think that it's something related to discipline, or if there are differences about concerning seniority, for example. Then said they were not concerned about the barriers, but of course some aspects were mentioned, and we also include them in the recommendations. Interesting, the thing about global north and global south was mentioned, but by one person, about the possibility that sometimes in these international research collaborations, there is a difference in power relations. So perhaps the global north have the founding and the global south do everything well. So trying to get this more equitable, would say, distribution could also be something to think about. So that was mentioned also in there. Then how to build trust in international research collaboration through technology when you only have that option, right? So that was especially mentioned in 2 stages before actually starting the research, initial stage setting and clear division of labor, like before starting any collection of data, for example. So trying to set these steps, it's clearly more difficult if you don't meet in person or if you don't work intensively on that. But of course, it's possible. And that's something that had happened, of course. And yeah, there are some authors that say that the actual communication practice and exchange is still to be further research, right? So it's has to be more beyond that. So trying to connect to the experiences in the pandemic, I have to say, yeah, we have a lot of asynchronous work. That's especially since the pandemic, trying to work with emails, documents, shared documents, some sporadic asynchronous session, trying to get more into further discussion or decisions are needed. When in those cases we try to meet, it's not easy. Time zones are a challenge. I will also mention that. So we try to use systems that get us easily understand which time zone are we, and trying to get and not missing the time, which had happened sometimes. And then we use different kinds of systems. We try to use institutional services, but for example, we have cloud storage, which works quite well when you work alone. But when we get 3 people inside, that it's crazy. It's not like Google Docs, for example. And that's something that we always like talk and discuss about it. And yeah, and that's then the stays abroad that I had. So I think it's more difficult to get people meeting regularly in person. That's what I thought, what I found in my 2 last stays in Germany and in Canada. So because of regulations of COVID, or because of this increase on remote work, people is keeping in different villages, or even because of the agenda, which always was there before anyway. So it's even more difficult to get people meet in person, even if you are there. So the specific times where you are meeting are more intensive as well, and more tiring, I would say, because you have only really short time, which we already do online in online meetings, right? So the benefits, I can completely agree. And there are other aspects which I already mentioned, the institutional or third-party use. So I put also an example about language and culture. I think it's something that it's not so well explored, and some studies have been noting that, because it is an issue. If you don't have enough good English skills, even if it will be a lingua franca or communicating language between the group, you cannot collaborate the same way, or you cannot express the same way as others. So you don't have the same words, or you can also communicate in a different way. So that's, of course, for non-native English speakers, that's important. And also for English speakers to understand this thing, it's also a point. Of course, knowing in person the others helps. That's something that I can say. But for my experience, I think it's common, or it was similar. I was already doing this, but with the pandemic, got more common for everyone in the field, and also including the use of social media, for example. So yeah, here I have these quotes that I wanted to discuss with you. So, for example, these participants said often have more contact through email and video conferencing than with colleagues in their building, in his or her building. And I can agree that sometimes I don't see anyone during 1 or 2 weeks, but I'm having 3 or meetings online with people from Germany or from Australia. So perhaps you can also talk about that. Then, yeah, I also mentioned that before, face-to-face meetings at the beginning and towards the end of the collaboration that was mentioned by the participants. But I can say that because it was also not possible, and now it's not also like a compulsory component, it's also possible to create trust in the research collaboration beyond face-to-face meetings, but of course it helps. Then there is the other quote. This is a two-edged sword, output. No, thinking about publications specifically. No, so yes, there are more outputs when you are doing international research collaboration. But in my context, any output produced by more than one author counts less. So I don't know if it happens for you, but for here in Spain is also similar. So depending on the discipline, and I think in the also countries, the number and order of authors is important in order to, for example, apply for a professor position. Or so these are things that are counted. So then about lingua franca, so a comment was comments concerning language demonstrated that English is used as lingua franca. There are no major issues. That's something that we mentioned in that article from not having any issues. So are not there, that's a question. And then the other one, there is not something special about international collaboration other than differences in rules and larger distance. Do you think so? May it depend. If you are early career researcher, if you are senior, if you are in a specific discipline, if you are doing a specific type of task, may it depend. That's questions. And yeah, so my conclusion here is that I think that every international research collaboration is different, and I can think of the different people with whom I have worked, the different kind of tasks that we have been doing, and the distribution of roles and work is completely different depending on the position you have, the seniority, and then the kind of nature of the collaboration. If it's a comparative study, or if it's more another kind of a study where you have to involve in all the steps. So I would say that there are a lot of nuances that we can discuss here. So until here my talk. Thank you very much for your attention, and well, looking forward to chat. Oh, we
Excellent.
cannot.
Thank you, Victoria. It was a really interesting talk. Sorry, the mute button seemed to stick on my interface. Unless you have particular reasons, you might want to stop sharing, and then we can kind of see everyone. So for those who, a couple of people came in a bit later, if you feel free to share your video, then it's obvious that we're talking to a room full of real people, but only if you're happy to be recorded. I'm going to invite questions now. If you want to say your question, that would be very interesting. You can just raise your hand and I'll ask you to speak. Once again, if you don't want to appear in the recording, you can type it in the chat and I'll read it out for you. So it was a really interesting talk. I think I can have quite a lot of questions, but who'd like to go first? Would anyone have a question immediately? Is that a question in the chat, Phil, that you want to, yeah, Phil.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was about 3/4 through typing when you said it. Just put your hand up, so I apologise for that. Thanks, Victoria, that's brilliant. I was just noting that the Delphi study gives you the opportunity for anonymity and control and respondents to revise, you know, as they're generating opinions and things like that. And I noticed a bit later in the paper, I think in closing, you were mentioning if you extended your work in IRC, you might go for other approaches, interviews and things. And I was just wondering if the Delphi arrangements were decided early on, or whether the Delphi arrangements just lent themselves to the kind of data that you wanted or something like that. I was just wondering, at what point did you decide on a Delphi study as discrete from, I don't know, a focus group or something like that? Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Philip. So yeah, that's a good question. Actually, we also discuss other possibilities. We thought that perhaps to reaching these participants were is in this way, to get them before in this kind of panel study. But we also discussed to do like we didn't do it yet, but we thought to do more like further research, for example, focus groups. We thought that would also bring more information. In that case, we also thought that the anonymity will also be useful in this panel to get more separate opinions. So that's why we discussed that at some point, and trying to remember with more our discussions, but I cannot anymore. But yeah, we thought about that, and we consider that at the end as a possibility.
So it was, I suppose then it was anonymity that persuaded you. Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. Thanks for taking the question. It was brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Philip, for the question.
And we have a question from Don next.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. That was really interesting, and yeah, I can definitely associate with a lot of what you were saying there. I have a comment, and then I have a question, if I may. The comment is really on the question that you were asking about this idea of visibility. You know, does joint authorship give you greater visibility? Now, that's a really interesting one, because I've done publications which are sole authored, and I've done publications which are joint authored. I do think that the joint authorship does give you, to some extent, a greater visibility, because you are able to depend upon a greater range of networking, and therefore a greater range of perspectives. So people are looking at that work through different perspectives, through different lenses. And I think that's quite important. But I do think it's also to do with, my experience has also been to do with the fact that when you're doing joint authorship, you're actually you're collecting together ideas and thinking and perspectives from a range of people in order to present them through that paper. So it's also to do, I think, with the contribution that comes through the paper itself, because of the joint authorship. It's not a single authorship anymore. You're not depending upon your own thinking and your own study. You're depending upon other. So I suppose I have a sort of, I think the visibility is increased, but I think it's possibly there for a number of reasons. But I've not studied it in depth. So that's just from my feel and my experience with it. But yeah, an interesting question, I think, a really interesting question. So my question is this: I'm fascinated by the fact that I've worked with other people in Spain and in Germany too. In fact, someone in probably the university that you were in Erlangen, Nuremberg, Ralph Ramaika. I don't know whether you came across Ralph while you were there, but anyway. I'm fascinated by the fact that in Spain, I'm aware of the fact that you do often have MA or PhD programs that run across universities rather than through a single university. And that, I think, is a really, really interesting dimension of collaboration, which can go outside of the country as well as inside the country. It seems to me that that's something that we don't tend to do here. We don't tend to collaborate in that sort of way, which is interesting that there is that difference. And then I was thinking about your model, your model of the different levels that can contribute factors to that sort of collaboration. And I was wondering, you know, from your experience of that sort of collaboration, where do you think the factors lie in that model that make it possible for those universities to collaborate in that way? I know it's a bit sort of, it's not exactly focused on your paper, but I'm just fascinated by that. If you have any insights into that.
Thank you very much, Don, for the comments and the question. I will start from the beginning. Just a mention about the co-authorship. I also agree. I can say that I would say that the paper that I have co-authored with international other international researchers are more cited, and probably because of the network that connects. And also, I found it really interesting saying it's not just like writing together, but also contribute like putting more from you in that paper. It's not one mine, which is really really important as well, because we don't do like dividing parts, because we are contributing all to the whole output. For example, I was thinking, yeah, sometimes we know that one of our colleagues only knows this kind of references, but we have another kind of background. For example, in my case, I know the literature in Spain and Latin America, and we can also get visibility to those to that literature, because it's also talking about that topic, for example. So we bring also our networks, our all our background to that. So I think that's also quite valuable. And yeah, about the question about the program, but this program is already, I think it was since 2006. I actually did that program as a student, and now I'm supervising in that program, a PhD program. And it's a really successful one. I started with 3 universities in Spain, and now it's 4. And I would say that the main point was that there were some people that already know each other, that work together already in some projects, and have really a strong background on educational technology in that case, because it's a program on educational technology, and decided to do that. Started doing like small things together, and then try to convince their universities to get this program together, which is not easy because of the bureaucracy process and who is giving the title and all these administrative issues. But yeah, they managed to do that through different steps, and it's an accredited program by the country. So it's a normal program, and we have participants from when everyone can join. It's not restricted to Spain, as I was saying. We have many students from Latin America and from other countries, but mostly from Latin America, because it's in Spanish. The program has some English courses, but mostly it's in Spanish. So that's I think probably the micro factors here, how the researchers were working, the colleagues they have. This then probably, of course, language will probably unite as well as a program, but the institutional part was key to get this program together, right? So now the titles that you get from this program are signed, like the 4 universities are in the title, saying it's provided by those. You are enrolled to one of these universities, but you get the title that is valid for this. So I think probably micro factors, but of course meso factors will have been necessarily to get that possible, like the institutional structures.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Victoria. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So if it's okay, I have a question. I mean, I probably have several, but let me just choose one for now. And I'm hoping this won't come across as too cynical, but it is a bit cynical. I mean, I've done in recent years international collaboration that has gone okay, and I like it. But I learned to be a bit wary quite early in my academic career. I was involved in quite a large European Union project, and it had, I think, about 12 partners from about 10 countries across the EU. And what I learned is that most of these people are not having the same vision. and in many cases are not actually doing very much work. And you have to ask, well, what is the reason for this international collaboration? And it's a very mercenary reason, which is that's the way to get that money was you had to have a certain number of partners. So you just start bringing more people on board, as though that intrinsically makes the research better. So I wonder about this, because when I looked at your recommendations, of course, I think there's an assumption there that more international collaboration is a good thing. And I'm wondering if it always is. And you're kind of making recommendations for funding, which I read as being more funding, right? And I'm wondering whether we can step, by accident into just causing this kind of behavior where it's not real collaboration at all. It's international, but it's not real collaboration. So I wonder about your views on that. That's a bit more of a cynical question. And also, when you were talking to these people in the Delphi study, was anybody ever cynical like that? Or did everybody in the study always think, oh, this is great,
Yeah, thank you, Brett, for the questions. Well, starting from the last one, actually, they were quite positive. I don't know if it was more this social desirability of saying, yeah, well, it's everything good. But there were, of course, some specific comments, but I think I mentioned some of them, like these power relations between Global South and Global North, I think was an important critical point in that sense. And the one talking about the more outputs is not good for me because of my context. So I think there were some specific comments. So in the general overview of the results, I think it's not so clearly seen, it's more hidden, but there were some critical comments, yes. And yeah, I think it's a really fair question to ask if it's good, actually better to do more international research collaboration. Yeah, well, I also had that experience sometimes that you start doing something and then you realize how other people work. Yeah, and say, well, yeah, that's going to get more work, and it's not easy to work with those partners. So I had also that experience. I think in the main, if we think in the positive sense, I think it's good because you probably do things better together with more people thinking. But the problem is what not those people are thinking with you, but rather are not working in the same vision, right? So I think that's actually an important point at the beginning, to try to clarify what everyone is expecting from this research activity, and also this distribution of roles and tasks. I think that's probably quite important, and sometimes we forget to be so clear about these parts, and then we get these situations where we see that that some people are actually not with us, and yeah, and they are only for the funding. Yeah, that's also a perverse thing. But we have also these kind of things with publications, right? The open access publications that we have to pay. There are also some of these double-edged aspects in academia that I think we have to of course know and be aware of them. And I agree that not always, probably it's better to have more partners, right? It's better if you have partners that actually work with you and collaborate with you and actually contribute to something that you are learning from others, interacting. So the real sense of collaboration. If it's not, probably it's another thing.
Yeah, thank you. I think Kyungmi wants to follow on.
Hello. Thank you so much for your presentation, Victoria, and the paper as well. As a person who knows a little bit about your publication so far, and then group that you've been working with, I'm just wondering, to which extent that you are saying that's really international, it's really about international collaboration, or it's just collaboration happen to be with international people. So I think a lot of good things that you have mentioned, it doesn't really have to have international, in it, because you made a clear kind of definition that you see international more expensive way, that people who are in the geographically same area but having international background, you still see it is international collaboration. So I get that. But even so, I'm I feel like it's like at the moment that it's really difficult for us to find good collaborators, whether they're international or domestic. So developing good international collaboration experience or relationship with, I mean, it doesn't matter with whom, whether they're international or domestic. So I'm just wondering if you can expand or giving some critical reflection on that bit, that whether it's really about international or just you ended up meeting great people and just working with them.
Thank you, Kumi. So that's an interesting point. So probably at some points it has been that had happened anyway, right? Because I was in Germany and I met the other colleagues that work in the same department, and we discussed some shared interests, and we worked together at some points, even if we were not working in the same project, right? But I think in those cases, yeah, probably. Not always, I have to say, because in some cases, I think probably the ones that were more social media involved, I was more searching, or someone was searching more intensively on people like have this kind of profile that knows how probably their work, their trajectory. So in part, yes, and other parts, I think it's something that you also search for. So it's not fortuitous or casuality, right, or casual. So I think sometimes can happen by these kind of changes, but sometimes you have to intensively work towards that to make that happen, actually, because you have some shared interest and you want to work with someone else that it's that you feel that it's interesting and you can learn more. And then you have to put more effort on that, I think. Yeah, have both experiences.
Thank you. So can I follow up from that? I mean, you have a brief discussion at the start of your paper, I noticed. There are a few things in your paper where you said them, and I thought it's interesting you say that because of the way that you've been doing this paper yourself. One of them is this collaboration cliques kind of point. You know, it seems like once international researchers form bonds with other, you know, international links and bonds with people they trust, then they keep working with the same people again and again and again. And then when I was looking even at your reference list in this paper, and of course I looked at your website prior to this event, I can see that that's kind of true for you too, right? So what's your experience of that? And is that a good or a bad thing? Is that just inevitable, or does it have, you know, I mean, it's described in the paper as a bit of a problem. It's like a bit exclusionary. One of these people says it's like Beverly Hills 90210, all this kind of thing. What's your experience of this clique kind of situation?
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Yeah, actually, that's right. I have also that experience. If you have been working with people that usually have some shared interests, and you know that that you work well together, I think that's probably makes sense to keep working in the same kind of topics or the shared interest that you have, because you actually know that they are that works, right? Because you were mentioning before, well, when in these large projects where you have people that probably are not working, probably you are not usually working with those people, right? Then this kind of probably that will not happen again unless there is funding in the middle, right? So when you have some bad experience, you probably don't want to contact again that person to get them involved in that. So I think that's probably normal. That's perhaps creates some kind of endogamy in some sense. But I think that sometimes these kind of like ongoing and intense relations in this kind of working together in collaborations gets also getting other people and increasing your network. So I think can have this critical point, but has also some other points like this kind of broadening networks and getting other people connected to you. Yeah, so I think I have been increasing also the network of people that I have been working with from the beginning to nowadays. I know that it seems that I'm working with the same people probably in the last years, but it's true that we have been increasing because of the network of all the networks in our, so the network of the other colleagues that also help to increase this, all this network.
Interesting. So as you expand the clique, it becomes less cliquey because there are more people invited. That's kind of.
I think so.
Sejin had a question in the text. Did you want to ask that question, Sejin? You were kind of worried, which I appreciate those worries actually.
Yeah, I mean, this is not actually a question. I do hope that there are no kind of numbers that can, I don't know, like represent academics, international research experiences, because as you mentioned, Brad, you said your international research experience were not very great in the beginning of your career. So I just thought then people might just come up with an idea that they can, so the academics can have some kind of numbers so that when academics want to find I don't know, trustworthy research, international researchers, they just refer to that. But that's a terrible idea, but some people might like it. So I wondered how Victoria think about this kind of view.
Thank you, Sejin. Yeah, I know that there exist some portals where in some specific calls, I remember that there were some portals where you can find partners for a specific topic on a specific for a specific research call. I'm not sure how easy or how, so if they are so used, right? Because as we were mentioning before, we get to use working with the same people and the same institutions. So that's something that I think it happens. I can imagine that perhaps if you need a specific partner from a specific country, which some funding calls ask for, you will go specifically to find some partner there. But I don't have experience with that concretely. We have been, like when we had wanted to work with other people, we just went to the person directly and said, we want to work with you, and and then we started with that. So I'm not sure if someone perhaps has more experience with that.
An idea just came to me. I'm sorry, can I go on? So an idea came to me that I am interested, I'm very curious kind of research trajectory of any scholars from the beginning of the his or her research research career or research trajectory. So let's say we track how Kyungmi started her international research experience, and we can build a kind of network from while we put Kyungmi at the center, and we kind of track how her research network kind of expand or develop, or it kind of settle in some part, or she finds another breakthrough. So if we can do those kind of research, that could be interesting.
Indeed.
I'm pretty sure Google already knows that about me, but it sounds scary, Sejin.
Yeah, but I agree that no more factor to judge us. I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me this is a potentially dystopian future, right? It's like you could have metrics about your international collaboration that feed into your promotion case. You could be looking on portals for international collaborators where they've all got reviews about how good a collaborator they are. I'm sure this is ResearchGate's next model. So Sejin, I think you've got a good idea, and we can have the Journal of Kyungmi Studies for you to submit that to too. I think it's going to be very good. So Don, you had the next question, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. And it follows on really from some of the discussion that we've just had. And thinking about my experience over the years, I must say that with regard to collaborators, I'm pretty choosy. I don't tend to collaborate with people that I've not met. that I haven't discussed things with. And although I can be put into contact with people through others, I still want to have some level of discussion with them. I'm pretty choosy, you know, what I believe are the right reasons, yeah, because in the end, you know, you're dependent upon the quality of what comes out, and you can be judged on that. So you know, I think that I do it, but it does take time. You know, developing international collaboration links, or any collaboration links for that matter, takes time if you're going to go into that sort of depth of discussion and finding out whether you can work with someone and what the results could be. It's time consuming. And I think it's often the time that isn't necessarily put into our timetables, shall we say, to enable that to happen, which forces, I think, some people to take shortcuts and then to try to collaborate with people that they think are, you know, might work, and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't think that these matching lists are for me are not a very good idea. I would never use them personally, but there you go. But my question really was and it comes back to something that was discussed earlier about collaboration, which was, you know, do you form cliques in terms of collaboration? And I think the answer to that one, from my experience, is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I've collaborated with some people for a long time, and even though I might not collaborate with them for 2 to 3 years, I can go back to them and collaborate with them later. But I'm also conscious of the fact that I'm quite happy to work with new collaborators. So I think for me the answer to that will be yes or no. But I was interested in your experience with this, Victoria, because, you know, when Brett indicated at the outset of this webinar your width of interests. Now that for me was very, very fascinating, because I also have a width of interests. And I was thinking about this in terms of collaboration, you know, and thinking about this in terms of cliques. So I was interested in how do you find, you know, you're looking at all of this width of interest that you have in different directions. You're wanting to pick up it at different times, in different directions, etc. How does that work for you in terms of collaboration? Does that make it more complex? Does it make it easier? Does it mean that the pattern is particular, the relationships are particular? I'd be really interested in that. If you have any thoughts on that, please.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, well, I had to say that I also enjoy collaborating with new people as well. I didn't mention that, but I think that's always well, challenging at the beginning, but then depending on how it goes, it's always exciting. So I think probably having a wealth of interest that comes also from the trajectory that I had, because I think probably it's different with other colleagues that had stayed in the same place with the same kind of positions. But when you move around and you work in different projects, you also get this vision of different topics. And yeah, and when you are a curious person and want to learn more, it's like, I think sometimes it's a problem, because you want to do much and it's not possible. Well, it's possible, but yeah, well, not in your time, in your timing. So, but I'm trying to focus on specific ones also makes that you get working with some different people for different topics, that also get different constellations of networks there as well. Yeah, that's true. But now I'm trying to perhaps focus more on 2 or so, or not to be too dispersed. But that's something that I had the last years, because of the working in different kind of projects. And yeah, and I think it's not easy. It's not easy and gets complex that you have to focus on one aspect and then you go to the other collaboration and it's a completely different thing and people work in different way and the rhythm is different. So yeah, it's manageable, but not easy, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, that's really
Thank
interesting.
you, Don.
So I'm going to ask Kyung-mi to ask the next question. Before I do, just let me say we've got just under 10 minutes left. I know there are a few people here who haven't yet posted or asked any questions. Of course, it's voluntary, you don't have to, but you know, if you're one of those people, in terms of cliques, right, it can end up with the same few people asking questions all the time. So if you haven't asked anything, maybe now soon would be a good time to do it. But Kyung-mi, you have the next question.
Yeah, so Victoria, I was going to ask this question probably on behalf of doctoral students here. So, I mean, as you can see, some of our doctoral students are there and recent graduates, and a lot of people from the center, they're actually doing doctoral students at the moment. They will probably watch the video. So I think for me, you're the person that among the people that I have met, that you have the most successful postdoctoral research experience, international experience. You actually went to Edinburgh for that. And I know that a lot of our doctoral students are actually worried about or want to explore the different ways that they can actually move the country to have more postdoctoral experience. So I thought like it may be really useful if you kind of explain a little bit of background story, how you ended up contacting the particular researcher and move and how it was and what our students can prepare for this similar successful journey like yours.
Thank you, Kyung-mi. Well, that's a good point. We were also mentioning if it's a question of luck that you get into people that are well, I think I was lucky, but I will say that I didn't have any contact before in Oldenburg. So I came, I went to Germany without. I had some basic language skills just because I wanted to learn before, but actually I didn't have any contact there, any colleague, which I think it's the most common way to get into some other place, because someone has a contact or someone and gets you in touch with a professor that needs some postdocs, or so that's I think the most common way. In my case, I actually was looking in different portals like academic positions. Now it's a portal in Euraccess, which is much better than was when I went away. So I look at many portals, and I had also to prepare like a research plan, teaching portfolio, this kind of documents that many positions were asking for. Well, the CV, of course, in different formats. That's everyone wants their different template and different format, or the application that you have to fill in and then you cannot save. There are some these kind of things, but so in my case it was through ResearchGate. So I got actually, for me, ResearchGate was quite useful for that. So there's an option that is like jobs, and you can get their jobs positions in your field because they are recommended based on your profile. So you get their different positions and you can apply for them. And that was like the case that this position was published there. And I went through it, and I didn't expect it because it's usually LinkedIn, more common, but not that much in our field. I would say it's more in business case, but so there's a possibility there, and I think there are more positions always published there than before. And also Twitter is also a good source, I would say. At that point, I didn't see anything interesting, but my network was not that big as it is now, or was not that bigger. So then if you have if you are following people that usually have some labs or some centers, they sometimes publish also their positions that are available. And I think that's also a common practice right now. So I think these are good ways to go. I also apply for other positions, but it was through different systems. So actually, I think that the most useful ones, I think these are the ones. That's why I was saying before, also in the recommendations, and because the other colleague from Australia also saw that offer on ResearchGate. So we saw the same position in the same place, coming from really different places, really far away. So that's why I was saying, well, social media was not so mentioned by our participants, but they were senior and they were in a different kind of position. But early career researchers may benefit from using all these platforms to find more, to increase their network as well.
Thank you. Just very quick kind of follow up that. So you're just, it seems like you're suggesting that you haven't only had any contact before, it was pure application you made, and you haven't only contact different professor to get the opportunity. So you're basically, what you're suggesting is like our students can look for the opportunity posted and then try to get their CV stronger. And at a certain point when they're ready is go for the jobs by application.
Yeah, that's the point when you don't know anyone in the other place. If you can, I would say that it's probably, it gets easier if you get some people that knows the other people, and then you got some contact before. But in my case, was no contact before. Sometimes you find that this kind of position may be filled because of someone that is in the same place. That could happen, but sometimes it does not. So it could be that happening. But if you can also have some contact before, I don't think it's a bad thing as well. So the other colleague did that, contact directly, and then got another position in another project. So perhaps sometimes people have more places to fill, and yeah, it's worth it to increase always the quality of your CV, the things that you are doing, and then putting that into value in the applications.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. That's really interesting. I mean, I was struck by how the participants in this study raised that they didn't use many complex technical tools. And despite being involved in the area of technology enhanced learning, I have to say I'm pretty skeptical of a lot of these complicated tools myself. And yeah, I use email and Zoom and things like that the most often, right? So do you have any experiences with tools that you found really do work for you now? Or is it because you could say you need the ResearchGate to get you started to find opportunities, but after that you're just emailing people and working on Zoom or whatever, right? Do you know of any good instances of collaboration that have really relied on complex technologies to do the knowledge production internationally? Is that very common in your experience?
No, I would say that it's also similar. So we even if I'm using more technology, well, ResearchGate, I think it's useful, but also has some other issues that we know, right? And like other kind of social networks. But for me, it was useful for that point concretely. I'm using also some technologies, but I don't think most of people, and neither me, use like really complex technologies to do international research collaborations. So we usually use video conference systems depending on what the institution offers. We have Blackboard, Zoom, Teams. So anything that will work. We have, and then cloud storage as the participants. That I think the experience was quite similar. I'm also, well, I was also using at that point tools like Slack or Mattermost, these more direct messaging, no, or group instant messaging, but it's not complex thing either. So it's more for getting more fluid communication beyond email. So actually, no, I would not say that we have using, well, except from systematic reviews where it's a specific software where we collaborate together, but it's not, it's a specific kind of research, so not for the general processes.
Okay, thank you. It's as I suspected, but I just thought I would check. We've kind of reached the end of the time slot for this event. So unless anybody has any pressing questions, which I don't think they do, we can draw this to a close. I mean, one of the other things I was struck when reading this paper is the starting point was this kind of very pessimistic statement that if you publish in Spanish journals, even if you write them in English, nobody from outside of the Spanish world will read it. And I'm hoping we kind of proved you wrong there, because this was published in one of those Spanish journals, right? So I discovered this journal. I thought it was very nice. So obviously international collaboration can have all sorts of effects. But thank you very much, Victoria, for your interesting presentation and your willingness to engage at length with the questions. We've really enjoyed it. As I said at the beginning, this session has been recorded, and we aim to put that on YouTube over the coming weeks, where it will add to the library of resources there. So if anyone else has anything else they'd like to say, then now is the time. Other than that, no, thank you, Victoria, very much. Perhaps we can express our gratitude in the conventional way.
Thank you.
Yeah, well
Thank
done,
you very
Victoria.
much.
Very, very
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you very much
everyone.
for the invitation. It was really, really nice to discuss with you.
Great stuff. Thanks.
Good to meet you, Victoria, and see you all soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
Brett.
Bye-bye.